Fatal Strike Productions presents An Urchin's Dream. Produced and narrated by Nathan Boston. Written by Emma Jackson. Sound design and mix by Felipe Stolnik. And illustrated by Sneck. The wind sang, lashing at the urchin's brown curls as he trekked up the mountain. Dressed in threadbare, dirty pants and a tunic, he clung to the shadows like a vampire. He kept his goal in mind, High Nobleman Nadir's mansion, as he navigated the jagged peaks. Like all high noblemen, Nadir was given a city to govern, the city of Draymore. But unlike most high noblemen, Nadir lived outside the city in seclusion at the top of a mountain. The urchin's teeth chattered as the icy wind bit at his exposed skin and grazed his spine like claws. Finally, he arrived at the enormous mansion atop the peak of the mountain. He gazed up at the majestic spires of the house that scraped the night sky, and then he started to have doubts about his plan. He looked back down the side of the mountain. He had come so far, and the scraps thrown out by the taverns back in town were surely all gone by now. No, he would do this and change his life. Or die trying. He examined the lower floors, trying to find a way in. There was an open window just above the ground floor. He pulled his dark beanie over his telltale curls, drew in a breath, and gathered his wits. He reached up to the ledge below the window, pulled himself up, and flopped, ungracefully, into the room. As he picked himself up off the floor and peered around, he realized he was in the servants' quarters. Luckily, no one was in the rows of single beds lining the wall. Cheery, foot-tapping music echoed through the hallways and floors. Roaring laughter erupted from somewhere deep in the house. He slipped out of the servants' quarters, heading down the hallway, following the floor plan of the house he'd memorized before starting his mission. His lips turned into a smirk, knowing he was close to the high nobleman's bedroom. He could picture it. A life of ease and plenty, eating in taverns and owning his own home. But something pulled him up short. A quiet, yet high-pitched sound that spiked his blood with instinctive terror. His pulse thrummed in his ears as he glanced at the door next to him. He did not recall this room from the house's floor plan. Curiosity gnawed at his gut. With sweaty palms, he pushed the door open. A single candle flickered in the large, cold room. Deep within the darkness, dozens of pairs of eyes glared at him. Startled, he spun around to flee, but the door had swung shut and would not budge. His knees trembled as a creature from the shadows growled. As his eyes strained to see through the shadows, his heart jumped into his throat. Creatures, ones he couldn't even put a name to, locked in cells lining the walls like prisoners of a heinous crime. There were fangs, red eyes, scaled skin, fur, and pointed ears. But one creature wasn't locked in its cage. Wolf-like, with no fur, covered in welts, with melted flesh, and a feral glint in its otherwise soulless eyes. It launched itself at him. The hairless wolf howled as it knocked him to the floor. His screams tore through the house as his blood spilled onto the floorboards. The wolf ripped at his clothes, clawed at his stomach. Suddenly, the door burst open. A butler stood at the threshold, gripping a syringe filled with a bright blue liquid. His face glistened with sweat, and his eyes widened in terror. The wolf snarled and pounced, as if it knew exactly what the liquid was. It ripped the butler's abdomen open, spilling his intestines over the floor. As he collapsed on the ground, the wolf clamped down on his throat. He helplessly jerked on the floor as blood began to bubble from his lips. Bile burned the back of the urchin's throat as the crimson red liquid covered the floor. But his instincts kicked in, and he scrambled to his feet. Pain ricocheted through his body from the deep lacerations on his arms, legs, and chest. But he ignored the wounds and bolted out the door, ran down the hall, and into the high nobleman's room. And there it was, the great helm of Baldir, cast in gold and ornamented with a single fist-sized ruby. He could hardly believe it was right where the grinning old man said it'd be. Alarmed hollering and a howl of the wolf beast came from down the hall. The urchin snapped out of it and grabbed the helm. He climbed out of the high nobleman's window and scaled the building to the ground. He didn't even feel the cold as he went back down the mountain and into the cover of the forest. The massive wealth of the gold and the enormous ruby right there in the palm of his hands. He laughed and danced into the trees hysterically. He was so lost in his euphoria, he didn't even notice the earthquake that was rocking the land. The kingdom trembled and whined. Fires bellowed through the villages and screams disrupted the night. Mountains roared as they erupted from the earth. The urchin, now a rich man, did not even notice the strange and terrible creatures lurking in the surrounding shadows, watching him. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed the story. We've got a lot more content coming up to include episode 5 of the Zendarian Tomes of Power. So be sure to like and subscribe and ring that bell so you get notifications on the new episodes that are coming out. All right, well, I'll see you soon. Peace.